Welcome to Dan and Dave's Garage, and today we are working on this 1997 Nissan Hardbody pickup that I had won at auction for just 1,100 bucks. Now, there's a previous video of where I went all the details of getting this thing up and running, and since then, I've been driving this thing pretty much every day. I think that there's one major area that this thing can be upgraded, and that is to not be a rolling beer can. This thing is rather tinny on the inside and kind of loud on the highway. And I'm trying to see if we can make a difference and whether it's worth it for you to do the same thing. So let's go ahead, do a little test drive, see where we're at for a baseline, and then we can start tearing this thing apart, installing some sound deadening, and see what the difference actually is and if it's worth it.
Let's first go over what we plan on installing. The main component of the sound deadening install is this Killmat 80mm sound deadener. This is a butyl-based sound deadener that actually doesn't do much to absorb noise, but rather helps to reduce noise through minimizing the vibration of the panels. Sound absorption can be achieved through the next item, a jute carpet backing. This is about ½ an inch thick and can either be used in addition to or replace the stock carpet backing.
Let's go over first our testing process. I'm just going to be using one of the many sound metering phone apps you can get from the App Store. And some people will probably think that that's not going to be a real test, but there are some studies out there that show they're perfectly adequate for getting a base reference for noise. So good enough for me. And I think as long as we maintain the same testing conditions, then we'll have a pretty good standard to measure against. One thing to also keep in mind is that loudness as perceived at the ear is not the same as decibels. So decibels is your sound pressure level, and loudness is both the sound pressure level and the tone of the sound. So we can have two sounds, one being a higher tone than the other, both at the same decibel rating, and have a different perceived loudness. The one that has the lower tone will be perceived as less loud. So in this case, we'll be using the decibel metering app as a objective measure, but there will be a subjective part to this test, which is going to be what my perceived loudness is. You know, lower tones sound better and are more comfortable to deal with than higher tones, which is what we're looking to do with the sound deadening. Next, we're going to just start the vehicle and see what it sounds like at idle, just sitting here.
I only reviewed this footage after I put the truck back together with the sound deadening, so feel free to use your best CSI enhancing software and squints to argue with me in the comments with what number you see. We're going to be testing under 3 conditions: engine running at idle, 55 miles an hour cruising, and 75 mile an hour highway cruising. For our first test of a standstill idle, we get a consistent 74 decibels. At cruising at 55 miles an hour, we get 80 decibels. And once we're up to speed and cruising at 70 miles an hour, we get 83 decibels. Quite the room for improvement, to say the least.
Okay, test drive done. Let's start pulling this thing apart.
2 products we won't be using today that you may be interested in to maximize results is also the use of closed cell foam and mass loaded vinyl. The downsides to these additional products is obviously 1, the cost, 2, the weight, and the fact that once you add so much material between the carpet and trim, you may actually struggle putting the interior back together because the tolerances are too tight. Installing the additional mass-loaded vinyl is also more difficult, as it has to be installed as one continuous sheet to achieve sound blocking, and any cuts, splits, or separations drastically affect your final results. These 2 items, the butyl sound deadener and the jute carpet backing, I believe are the bare minimum to try and achieve sound deadening, and we're going to see how much of a difference just these 2 items make, and if I'm right. If you would like to support the channel, we have an Amazon affiliate link in the description below that has all the materials and tools you need to complete this job as well. It doesn't change the price you pay and gives us a small commission to keep these videos coming.
Okay, well, as you can see, everything is now out. Pretty empty. Now, it's pretty obvious why this thing sounds like a tin can, because that. I'm really excited to see how much of a difference, especially this area, makes here, given that this is all just echoey. Listen to that, right? Now, obviously, you can see that it is really dirty in here. We'll clean this up first, and then we'll prep the surface, and then we'll start laying down the sound editing.
If you like the hoodie that I'm wearing, we have released it to help celebrate 1 year of making content as Dan and Dave's Garage, and it's available linked below in the description if you'd like to directly support the channel.
Okay, now that we've got the stink bugs all vacuumed up, we can just start prepping the surface. So Just got some rubbing alcohol and rag so we can prep all the surfaces, make sure it's nice and clean, and then we can stick all the sound deadening everywhere that we want. So that's gonna be the roof, it's gonna be the back, it's gonna be little jump seat panels.
It is important to clean the surfaces well to maximize panel adhesion, because after all, we do not be tearing this interior apart if it starts peeling. Working with this Killmat is actually really simple. With the pre-formed squares, it makes it easy to bend and cut along the lines to size the sheets appropriately. Do not use a normal pair of kitchen scissors for this. Go ahead and get an actual pair of shears, as it will save your hands and make the install go a lot smoother. Once we are satisfied with the size and shape, we can go ahead and peel the backing and stick it down. You can get a roller to do this, which would probably help for a larger vehicle, but all the times I've done this, I've never used one and have yet to have a butyl sheet unstick. Just make sure to put a decent amount of force into the sheet and verifying that your edges are all properly sticking. Going around edges and corners can be tricky, but the butyl will stretch to fit the contours, so just take your time and make sure there are no air pockets.
Okay, quick sound check.
With a quick little sound check, we can tell that it definitely lowers the tone and thus could lower the perceived loudness. Remember that the whole panel does not have to be covered with the butyl sheets. Try and focus mainly on the sections that are large and have flex in them. Think a drum. These are your main culprits. Completely filling the panel is not necessary to hear a difference, as you just saw. This is especially important for hard to reach areas such as door skins, but go ahead and go crazy on large flat areas such as roof panels and trunk lids. This is more relevant for sedans and SUVs, but you do not need to do areas such as shock towers or any structural panels such as B or C pillars. These areas do not vibrate and are therefore a waste of time to cover up with vibration dampening material.
Okay, before audio test. That is insane.
Before we put everything back together, let's take a look at this headliner. Nissan really cheaped out, and it's made from the cheapest possible cardboard. Originally, this was constructed with cardboard, a thin base layer foam, and then a cloth liner. We're going to be changing things up a little bit and installing this vinyl. This vinyl has a poly backing that will help it stick with spray glue, and it might be a little bit thick to use as a headliner, but I got it on sale at a local upholstery shop and was able to color match it in the truck's original gray interior in the parking lot, so I'll take it. With all the crusty old foam vacuumed off, we can start prepping the vinyl. This part is easy, just lay it over to get a rough size, trim it down, and then start doing final surface prep. I decided to try and iron out some creases from storage, and they came out pretty well. We're going to spray both contact surfaces with permanent spray glue and let it dry for a couple of minutes to become tacky, before slowly starting from the middle and mating the surfaces together, making sure not to leave any creases or air bubbles. We'll work down in small sections to minimize risk of mistakes. It also helps to do this in a well-ventilated area, which I thought was ventilated enough, but it wasn't, so with my last few remaining brain cells, I moved outside into the cold. In memory of my lost brain cells, please, in an act of kindness and respect, subscribe to this channel for more content on 80s and 90s Japanese cars and motorcycles, and leave a comment down below for any future projects you'd like to see done to this hardbody or anything you see in the background. Back to the headliner, you can use heat to try and stretch the vinyl around any contours for maximum adhesion. The front edge of the headliner does not have a trim piece covering it, so I folded it over and glued it down. I did not do it for the rest of the edges, as these are all covered by trim pieces and looked like there wouldn't be enough space to install once folded, so just trimmed it down to where there was maybe 1/8 of an inch over the cardboard edge. I then let this dry overnight, and the next morning we're ready to install. Installing the headliner can be a little tricky with only one person, but it's doable. Fortunately, the Nissan Hardbody, there is literally nothing to these interiors, just some basic panels, clips, and interior screws. Assembly is just a reverse disassembly, and if you need to, take pictures as you are going along the disassembly process to make sure things are installing in the correct order. Here's our first use of the jute carpet backing. The original carpet backing on this back panel was falling apart and really thin. To install it is really straightforward. If yours comes apart in a single piece, you can use it as a template. Otherwise, lay it down over the carpet and cut it out to the best of your abilities. Once the main carpet shape is cut out and glued down, we can trim out the speaker holes and it's ready to install. For the floor carpet, we're just going to be using the remaining carpet backing as an additional layer. We are going to cover the section with the rear jump seats, the driver floor, and what's left on the passenger floor. In reality, I wish I had a little more of this, but I already had this on hand and was lucky that it worked out the way that it did. Now the rest of the interior can get slapped in together and we're all set. Reinstalling seats, I find it really important to start these bolts by hand. It's way too easy to blast them in with the impact, cross-threading them because the carpet threw them off. And just like that, everything is back together. I'm really happy with how everything turned out. I only broke 2 plastic clips and no trim pieces, which is a solid win for me. Even more exciting is the headliner. I think looks really good, and I think if you didn't watch this video, you wouldn't be able to tell if it was original or not. Now the only thing left to do is take this thing out for a test drive and see if it makes a difference.
Okay, Misty, you ready for a test drive?
With the engine idling, we now get around 72 decibels, a 2 decibel difference from original. At 55 miles an hour on the same road under the same conditions, we saw no difference and stayed at 80 decibels. At 70 miles an hour on the highway, on the same stretch, we get 80 decibels again, a 3 decibel difference from original.
Well, the results are in, and I can't say I'm not surprised that we didn't get any crazy results, any really large sound differences. We got maybe about 2 decibels between the idle, no difference between the 55 mile an hour, and at 70 miles an hour, we got about a 3 decibel difference. Is it quieter? Yes. I think I can definitely tell that it is quieter. It's definitely less high pitched. It's definitely a lower pitch. It's a more comfortable tone. And I think that the audio sounds better with the speakers in the back. I do think, however, if I were to do this again, I would probably try and use the closed cell foam. The closed cell foam is also peel and stick, so it's easy to use. And it would just try and give you a little bit more of that absorption, right? Because the only absorption product that we used was the carpet backing. I'd probably try and use that, especially if you have a vehicle that has a lot more interior panels to tear out and pull apart. You'll spend a lot more time than I did working on the interior. So to make it a little bit more worthwhile for you, then you would probably want to use that closed cell foam. I don't know if I'd step up to the mass loaded vinyl, but that one's a lot more expensive and a little bit trickier to actually install. As far as do I think it's worth it? I think yes, I think it is. There's definitely a difference, and for the price point and for the amount of time I spent on it, I think it's definitely worthwhile. One thing you're probably wondering is why did I not do the doors? Well, the door panels themselves are made out of the absolute shittiest cardboard possible, and the plastic clips that hold the door panels on have a very high chance of just ripping the cardboard apart, and then you're stuck with a floppy mess on the door. And then you're really risking trying to find a replacement, which on eBay you're going to get nickel and dime to death, or maybe you can find some in the junkyard, but chances are, like, these door panels, you're not the first person to try and pull them apart. And it's just very tricky to do it without destroying the door panel. So I'd just rather not deal with it. If you have a more modern car, probably, something not designed in the 80s that doesn't use cardboard, then probably go ahead, pull them off. But something from this era, designed in the mid 80s, then yeah, I would say good luck. Let me know if you found this video helpful. If there's any details I missed out on, make sure to argue with me in the comments. And if not, thanks a lot for watching.